Hello and good evening, lovely people watching this video. What I'm going to do today is I wanted to show you a way to edit in your subject into the Sweet Bambini Design sitter backdrops. So I've done lots of newborn tutorials, but I haven't really done much for sitters. When I use the term sitter, I mean an older child that's normally sitting, so probably anywhere between 6 and 10 months. This would also be suitable for crawling children, and I have seen it done with older children, but predominantly the way that this is set up is in the studio is I've set up these backdrops in a way that I would had I been shooting a sitter. So yeah, so the purpose of digital backdrops, if you haven't used them before, is to enable you to be able to have a lovely picture of your child in a setting without actually ever making it to the studio. Obviously at the moment, especially in the UK, we've got lockdown, and we've got a situation where photographers can't work, so we have to find other ways. So that's not really a problem, because digital backdrops are exactly for that. So this backdrop is Easter themed, as you can see, and you can see in the middle here I've left a space for your subject. Now this is a space for a single subject, and obviously you could fit 2 people in there if you wanted to, 2 babies. They don't have to fit in the gap exactly. You can use this as a backdrop which you can move it around and amend it in terms of you don't have to have the subject in the middle, but for the purpose of this I'm going to show you an edit with the baby in the middle. So I have different babies, well it's the same one, but I wanted to show you the edit in different lighting. Now if you're a photographer, you might be instructing your clients on how to shoot the pictures of the baby at home, or you might have done the actual session and already have the baby pictures. The backdrop itself is shot in studio like this one, with a big softbox coming from the left, and these pictures have been shot using a different backdrops and lighting. So the first one here, you see this is backlighting, so there's a window behind the subject, and you can see that here on the edges there you can see where the light comes from behind and all around. This means technically it wouldn't actually work with this sort of backdrop, but it does, because there's a really nice and easy way to edit the baby in, because the highlights are essentially burned out. The highlights means the light areas of the image. The second one is where a white background is used. It's a white wall, white floor, off-white to be honest, and this picture has already been edited, so it's nice and bright. And then the third one, we have a beige backdrop, which again, it's possible to use a different color backdrop to this one, but remember, really it needs to be, the original image will need to have your subject on a light backdrop. If you're shooting your subject on a black backdrop, there'll be a lot of shadows, and it will just have a heavier feel. It will be darker in the shadows, and that won't really work. So whether you're a photographer who's shooting for the backdrop, or whether you're a mum who wants to have your baby inserted in the backdrop, just remember we need a nice bright image with preferably a light seamless area behind. So I will be doing a video on how to shoot your pictures for these specific kind of backdrops at home or in the studio, so look out for that. But for the moment, let's concentrate on the edit. So the last picture you see here on the right is I've already done a little bit of Photoshop work on this file, where I've actually gone in and removed some of the background, and there really is so many different ways of doing a composite image. A composite image is one where obviously it's composite of the original image and the background. Now the first way I'm going to show you is using the backlit image, because that's probably the quickest. So I'm going to open the image up. I'm using Photoshop 5. I am ancient. I still love using Photoshop 5. You can use any program that has a capability to use layers. So what you'll find here is I'm going to open this image, and now I'm going to just drag it and drop it onto the backdrop. I'm going to close it down. So you see on the right hand side here, you've got that image on top, and you've got the backdrop underneath. So what I'll do now is I will change the top layer, which is the actual baby, into darken mode. So what that does, it will only show the darker areas of that layer. So if anything in that layer is lighter than the backdrop, it will not show through. I'll then go to edit, look at the top left, edit, free transform. I'm going to hold down the shift button or the arrow on my keyboard. I'm going to then, this is to preserve proportions, and I'm going to drag in the top right layer to resize the baby, because I want them to look like they would have been able to, they actually were shot in that sort of scenario. So there we go. And I could make it a little bit smaller, a little bit bigger, either way it looks realistic. But what darken does, what has happened is, so I'm going to go to normal mode. So you can see here, you've got these shadows under the feet and shadows under the body. These are the things that really make composites look realistic, is where your subject is sitting, they're obviously grounded, and there will be shadows around the subject sitting down. Those are the things that ideally you want to carry through to the composite, otherwise they will just look stuck in. All these areas here are lighter than the backdrop, so they will not show through, because I'm going to go to darken mode. Now if I went to lighten mode, what will show through is just the backdrop, because the backdrop is lighter than my digital backdrop. So you have to play around and have an understanding of blending modes a little bit. But anyway, what I've done is I've used darken. The problem with darken is what it doesn't show through is all of your subjects. So you can see there's bits missing, and those bits are the ones which were obviously lighter than the background, and we'll have to paint those in. So I don't want to go too fast, but just to go back, so I dropped the photo in and I went to darken mode and just resized. Now you can see over here where I'm circling right now, I'm going to go back to the normal blending mode, normal. There's an area here which is actually showing through in darken mode, and this is because this is the only part of that picture that's darker than what's underneath. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just grab an eraser. Look to the left, I've grabbed an eraser. I'm just going to get rid of that. In fact, if I want to, I can just get rid of these edges. I don't particularly need to, because they won't show through anyway, but sometimes I just like to do that. So let's go back to darken mode. So that looks good to me. So now if you look at the top right again, where that little hand is, cursor is, I'm going to duplicate that layer, and now I'm going to change it to normal, because what I want to do is I want to paint in any missing bits. So look again, the original layer is the digital backdrop, the first layer is the subject in darken mode, so all the darker parts of the picture show through, and then on top we've got the duplicated layer, and I've changed the blending mode here to normal. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to press the Alt key, and I'm going to hold down the third bottom icon, which is layers, and I'm going to click on it, and what that will do, this will cover that duplicated layer with a black mask. So what that means is I can now paint back in the only parts that I actually want to be in this image. So I'm going to paint in the missing parts. So to reveal what's underneath that black mask, you need to grab a white paintbrush. So I'm going to go over here, look to the left, paintbrush right there. White needs to be selected. Make sure you have the layer mask on the right selected. And the paintbrush needs to be probably, yeah, a medium size, and not too soft, because you're going to want a little bit of an edge. So this is a little bit of a try and error. Okay, so now I'm going to get in nice and close, and I'm going to show you what's happening. So can you see here where I've just used the darken mode on that middle layer, not everything's showing through. So I'm now going to paint in any missing bits from the top layer using that white paintbrush. I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller so I can be more precise. So here we go. So this is the original image, and I'm just revealing the bits that are missing. Now do bear in mind, with layers you can actually overpaint and then correct. So the way it works with masks, you can switch in and out of white and black, And what that means is you can correct any mistakes. If you use another tool like an eraser, you wouldn't be able to do that. So now I'm going to switch to black. I'm going to go back here and just get rid of the white, because we obviously don't want the backdrop from underneath showing, we just want the leg. So this is a process that you're going to have to do all the way around, and just make sure that you are painting in, so you're just switching between black and the white brush, and you're painting in any missing bits. And just to show you very quickly what that means in reality, so I'm going to do a pullback. Right, so this is what I've painted back in so far. Can you see the leg? Now there is a little bit of a problem here, because obviously this image was backlit, so now we have a studio lit backdrop and we've got the highlights all around the edges, which looks a little bit odd. So where the highlighter is, I will probably just reduce it by getting rid of it, but we can fix it in post-production after anyway. So let's just keep concentrating on painting in those missing parts. Okay, so this is the arm. So I'm going to just get rid of the background, and obviously we want to keep the arm. We can see that the dress is definitely something which hasn't completely been picked up. Okay, let's just go around here. The hair would have definitely been picked up. Okay, so we've just got this little piece here. And now this is incredibly boring to watch, because it's quite sort of precise work, but it doesn't actually take too long once you get used to it. Okay, so then let's go to the other side. I can see there's nothing here that would have been missing. The little girl was definitely darker. Just there was a tiny bit. And let's keep going. Over here perhaps there could be a little bit of the dress missing. That was very minuscule. Okay, and those lovely shadows are coming through, which is great. Now obviously there's a little cloth on the floor here, and what you see, the darker part, so the little girl was photographed on a floor, on a wooden floor, and that's now obviously shown up because of this layer. So let me switch off the top layer. Can you see? This is now covered in floor, but because the texture is quite similar to the back there, it doesn't really matter so much, because you can't really see it. Once you do a pullback, it just looks like part of the floor. If you wanted to do a little bit of blending, it's easy enough to do. You would simply just go to here, and I would probably grab an eraser at quite a low opacity, very soft brush, and just get rid of a little bit of that, just so it blends into the background more. But don't get rid of the shadow underneath the leg, because we want it to obviously look realistic, and that's not going to happen without shadows. Okay, so there we go, she's been photoshopped in. So those two layers, I'm now going to put them together, and I'm just going to merge them. Oh no, don't merge them. Okay, I'm going to just basically flatten the image. I think that's going to be the way forward. There we go. And now I'm just going to fix those little areas that you can see here, where obviously they are lighter in the background. Okay, so I'm going to grab the clone tool, again left hand side here, and I'm going to do a nice softish brush, and I'm going to say darken, because I want to darken these areas of light skin so they are similar to the skin here. So I'm going to sample a little bit of skin from there in darken mode, and what that's going to do is just going to darken any of those blown out highlights. Now, I know what you're going to say, that doesn't look very realistic, and you'd probably be right, but that's okay. We'll do that on the leg as well. This is never going to be perfect because the lighting doesn't match, but sometimes we have an image we have to work with, and that's that. So we have to make the best of it. So I just wanted to show you how this works with different images. So now you can see what I've done here. So before and after. All we do is we're going to reduce the opacity of this so it's quite not so strong. So let's go to 33%. Okay, so there you go. Doesn't have to be 33. What it's done is definitely made the image blend a little bit more. Now the other thing that we have here that's still a little bit much, so let's approach this from another angle. And I'm going to duplicate the layer again. I'm just going to grab a paintbrush. I'm going to grab this backdrop color, which is an off-white. So see, that will appear over here, middle left. See where I'm circling? So that's just me sampling a color. And this is in darken mode. And now I'm going to just paint over those lighter areas. So I can do that here. I can basically sample a color from anywhere. Oh, didn't want to do that. And just calm down. So see, I can sample it from there. And we can calm down those highlights. Again, once you've done that, make sure you look at the picture. With editing, you have to keep checking. It's a little bit like when you watch a cookery program and they say to them, try your food. It's no different here. You have to keep checking your work and make sure that you're doing something which doesn't look unrealistic. I made a little bit of a mess there, but I think you get the gist. So actually a little bit of her elbow looks like it's missing, so let me just fix that. And there we go. I'm going to grab the patch tool. Sometimes you just have to do a little bit of post-production, and actually that's bothering me, so let's fix that with the patch tool. I'm getting distracted now, see? Okay, love the patch tool because what it does, it also takes through the texture of the skin. So again, right, let me show you before and after. Okay, so depending on how much attention to detail you like, I mean this really still bothers me because there's a bit of backlighting there, but most people wouldn't bother them. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a little bit of contrast, because you can see on the hair there's a little bit of flare where the image was backlit. So I'm going to duplicate the layer, middle right, and just go to soft light mode. And what that will do is that will add a little bit of contrast. What soft light does, it lightens the light areas and darkens the dark areas. I don't really want that to happen on the background, so I'm going to mask this. So I'm going to put a layer mask over it, and I'm only going to reveal with a white paintbrush the bits that I want to have that effect, and in that case it's the little baby girl. So soft light mode, and now I'm going to just reveal underneath. Okay. Now she's a little bit too contrasty compared to the backdrop, so I'm going to go halfway, and there you go. So the composite is okay. It's definitely a little bit of a mismatch with lighting, but a lot of people would be quite happy with that. What you can do now, as sort of to get a little bit more a more coherent image, is you can run a action that gives it an effect. So I've got one called film haze, for example. So if you like effects where they are quite gentle and looks a bit filmy, there we go. So I've run this on the whole image, and you can see now, because the effect has been applied to the whole image, it looks a lot more like it was actually taken in the studio on that day. So yeah, so I'm going to get rid of the film haze effect actually. No, I'm not. Make your mind up, Maria. So there we go. Okay, So I'm actually going to flatten that image. I'm going to save it now. This time we are going to use one of the other images, so an image which is lifted from the left. It's actually using daylight, so not the same as the backdrop, because the backdrop is lit using studio lights, but it will be absolutely fine to use. So as you can see, this will be actually very similar in the edit to the previous one, only this time the actual background has been edited and it's now lighter than the digital backdrop. So I'm going to drag and drop. This will go onto here. I'm going to close this image, and what we have is a situation where I'm going to go darken, and I can just move her here. So what has happened is I've just dropped the original file where the subject is darker than everything else in the digital backdrop, and the original background is lighter, which means when I press darken mode, only the subject will come through. Now this is almost perfect for this backdrop. So you can see if I move her up there in darken mode, what's showing through is some of the floor, none of the wall. So I'm going to just grab an eraser, and I don't want these sharp edges, so I'm going to just get rid of the sharp edges. The main thing that we really want from this is to keep the shadows underneath her so she's nice and grounded. And don't forget, we can actually resize her by going edit, transform, edit free transform or scale, and hold down the shift key, the arrow key on my Mac, and I can just change her to be a little bit bigger if I want to. If I wanted to cover the bunny, that's fine. I think it actually looks a little bit better there, and it's perfectly feasible that we have these big bunnies. So there you go. So you would think job done, not quite, because you can see that there's a little bit of the background showing through. So we just have to make sure that we have all of her showing. The fingers are not quite coming through there. So remember what we do, middle right, duplicate the little girl, go to normal mode, which will now show the original. Oh, and we have got some sharp edges, not that it matters, but I do like to, just as a matter of course, just get rid of any edging. There we go, nice big soft brush, remember. And now I'm going to cover this with a layer mask. So if you click Alt and the third icon, if you look to the middle right, when my hand is, when the little cursor is hovering, and that puts a mask over that layer. When I want to go to middle left of your screen, we want to pick the paintbrush tool and select white. So over here you can switch between white and black. Select white and then zoom in on your subject. Back to paintbrush, adjust the size, make sure it's not very soft, it's just sort of, I've got 34% softness. And then all you need to do is just zoom in and just make sure that you're painting in some of the original image. Don't worry if you make a mistake, to make sure that all the skin is showing. So look, if I make a mistake, I just switch the brush to black, and there we go, switch again, yeah, and then you just keep going and make sure, there we go, make sure that we have got all the parts of the image that we need. There we go. So over here I just made a mistake, so I'm correcting it. Okay, so over here let's go to white. Now I'm sorry if you can hear my dog snoring in the background. Here's a little bit of a snorer. Okay, and he's not been very well today, so vet's visit tomorrow. Okay, so you can see that here the skin, she's a beautiful little girl. The skin here is not pink, it's because some of the background is showing through. So the hair, because it's darker, I know it will be fine. Over here it's all good, just around the edges. Fine. Then we've got those lovely shadows showing through. The only thing we might want to do is if we want to paint a little bit of the this wooden floor out, because obviously I have this little cloth on the floor there, is we can just switch the layers to the darken layer, and as before, grab an eraser. On medium opacity, and just get rid of some of that texture that has come through, but you don't want to touch the shadows, so keep the shadows. Right, that didn't really work, so let's go back to the top layer, switch it back on, and go back to your paintbrush, and if you want to, you can just paint in and out the parts of the image that you want to show. So I'm just looking, let's have a look at the before and after. So what I've just done is I've just popped the subject on the background in darken mode, which doesn't pull through all of the subject. So I have duplicated the layer, covered it with a black layer mask, and then painted in any missing bits. And if you go on and off, you can see the right arm and some parts of the dress. So over here, just watch this area, and that's what I just painted in. So basically the highlights. But overall, when you look at this, this is pretty much a finished image. There's a little bit more contrast in the little girl than there is in the background. So what I would do here personally to make that blend and work a little bit more is I would grab the background layer, I would duplicate it, and I would probably go to soft light mode, which adds contrast, and then just adjust the opacity. So maybe there, and then it looks like she was there in the first place. So it's nice and realistic. So I'm going to flatten, and that is it, job done. Remember, the next stage that you can do is you can now apply an effect to the whole image. And in this case, I'm going to duplicate the layer and go to, let's have a look, what have I got? I've got millions of actions. I don't really use many of them. I mean, there's loads here. None of these are my cup of tea, but let's go for this one, dark wood. See, what it's done is apply the color effect to the whole image, which makes it more comprehensive. For me, the colors are a little bit unrealistic, so I'm going to bin it. And I'm just going to save this image as it is. I'm going to show you how to get that little bunny in the picture. So this is where the picture is taken on a slightly darker background. So the previous technique that we used with the darken mode wouldn't work. Let me show you why. So I'm just going to open this image, and I'm just going to drag it across to oh, I didn't mean to drag it in there. Okay, let's get rid of it. Let's drag it across. Here we go. So what you can do is, if I go to darken, what that will now do is it will also show the backdrop, because the backdrop is darker than the digital backdrop. So this tool will be useful to resize my subject still, but not so good on necessarily making it a realistic composite using this specific technique. So in this case, I wouldn't use that technique. I would just go to normal mode. Now, you have two ways you can do this. Well, actually, you have loads of ways you can do this. You can take this original image and you can now start working on removing the background before you get the image over into your digital backdrop. You can do this in a variety of ways. Modern version of Photoshop, which I have down there, but I don't really like using. There's a feature where you can simply automatically get the subject selected, and it does a pretty good job. And you just have to sort of adjust it, and you can then transfer it to the backdrop. And you can see that I've done that over here. So let me close this. I have removed some of the backdrop. The problem with this image is it was taken using daylight, so you can see that the edges there a little bit out of focus around places over here, so the selection won't necessarily be exact. But when you drag over this image, so let's switch the other one off. There we go. The top part I already have done some of the work, not all of it. You can see that the selection actually is very loose. If you go to multiply mode, you'll be able to see that there is some areas that I haven't done. So it's up to you how you do it. For the purpose of this video, I think I'm just going to start from scratch, just to show you how I tend to do this. So I have simply, so go to darken mode, make sure the baby position is positioned and scaled where you want it to be. So edit, transform scale, or free transform. Either way, you can hold down the Alt key. I'm going to make her a little bit bigger here. I like it that she's holding a carrot because it obviously matches this image, and I'm just going to try and center her. And now I'm just going to go to normal blending mode, and actually the shadows probably would still work, but we'll find out. So let's cover her. So Alt and layer mask, and now I'm going to slowly start painting her back in, but just the parts that I want. So a lot of people won't like that because it's a little bit time consuming, but that's one of the ways I do it. I tend to actually switch between different ways. So let's do this. So nice soft brush in white, and I'm just painting over, making sure that I get most of her in. There we go. See, so if I don't want to, I don't have to keep that cloth, although it will look better if I do. Right, so now I have painted the baby in, she's in, but obviously she looks stuck in. So we need to get rid of this background. I'm going to do that by switching to a black paintbrush, and I'm going to, so hold in a little closer, I'm going to make it quite a hard brush but not too hard. So what have I got it on? 78%, and I'm just going to paint away this backdrop. So remember, the original image was taken using an aperture which was quite shallow, so we don't want to have really sharp edges because they wouldn't have been sharp. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, at the moment, try and get rid of the background as much as possible. You might have to switch your brush size. See, this brush is quite hard, so I'm going to move to a soft, very soft, very small brush for those fun little adjustments over here. Okay, so around here again we've got the issue of shadows, and you can see there's some lovely shadows there, so I'm just going to make sure we don't want them shadows completely gone. So I'm going to leave the brush nice and soft, and I'm going to now paint away some of this original floor, but not at 100% opacity. I'm going to now reduce the opacity to 65%, and again now to 30%. So it's like a blending of the digital backdrop with the original backdrop. And that shouldn't be a problem as long as you photograph, as long as the original image is on a nice light background. So I've just painted over the toe here. I'm going to go to 100% opacity, and now this is just really another exercise in switching between your white and black brush and painting in and painting out. So you can see that actually once you're practiced, this needn't take an age. It's a little bit of an annoying job, but once you've done a few of those, it's like anything. It's like riding a bike. And you also work out with time what the best method is and what the best blending modes are, and whether you like to extract the subject first or not, or do it like I'm doing it right now. It's quite nice to actually do the subject, to extract the subject from the picture, because you can drop it into more than one backdrop. And sometimes I will actually, before I flatten this and save it, what I would do is I would actually remove the background and just save the PSD of the extracted subject. So, oh, I can't work out if this is the background. Yeah, I think so. Okay. So now and again you have to just make sure that you're zooming out and doing a good job. So we're almost there. So you see, when the brush is too soft, it doesn't look right. The brush has to be sort of reasonably hard, otherwise the edges will not be defined enough and it will not look realistic. The thing about composites, let's face it, they are a compromise, but I think they're also fabulous if you're a photographer that's quite happy taking pictures of babies on white backdrops or plain backdrops, but the parents will sometimes ask for something a little bit more, maybe either dressy or a little bit more fancy, and it's not something that you would normally do. And digital backdrops are a brilliant way of saving money, because obviously you don't really need to buy all those props. You just pop the baby in the backdrop, and voila, and job done. Okay, so now I'm getting to the floor area, so I'm going to extract that carrot, but we are now getting to the shadows, which, remember, we don't want to get rid of them. So I'm going to switch now to a soft brush and a bigger brush, and before I decide what I'm doing here, I'm going to pull back and have a look. Okay, so I'd like for the edge of my cloth to show, because I think that's quite realistic, and over here is where the problem lies. So what we're going to do is we are going to reduce the opacity now. Oops, hang on, edit and step backwards. We're going to reduce the opacity to about 60% and just reveal a little bit less. Now you've got this bit in the middle there. Ideally I would have a little bit of the digital backdrop showing through, but I don't want to get rid of the shadow. So again, soft brush, 60% opacity, and just maybe even reduce it even more. So make sure you're keeping the shadow, but it looks like a bit of that cloth is showing through there. I accidentally painted over the foot, which I didn't mean to do. So let's paint that foot back. So now I'm switching a lot, but all I'm doing is I'm switching between the white and dark brush, and I'm just switching the opacity. So you can see there. Now these shadows here, we must keep them. So let's just go in at, let's have a look. Reduce it to a nice soft brush, and opacity, let's go to 40%, and just get some of that floor to show through, but keep those lovely shadows. Okay, let's see how we're doing. Okay, that's a pretty realistic job, I think. Over here we've got a little bit of a conflict because we've got a sort of shadow but no floor coming through. So let's have a look. What does that look like? Yeah, I think that looks okay. Could she have been there? I think she could have been there. I'm actually going to move her a little bit. There we go. Yeah, I think that works. So she is brighter than the backdrop. So as we can do this, we can duplicate the actual backdrop, and we can go to screen, which lightens the backdrop, and we can just play with the opacity. There we go. So the backdrop is a little bit brighter. We can also duplicate it again and go to soft light, which adds a little bit of contrast. Play with the opacity, There we go. But I think that looks good. The only thing that I would probably do personally is this carrot in her hand is very red and the carrots in the picture are orange. So I will go to selective color and I will now just play with those reds to just reduce them a little bit, or maybe add a bit of yellow to the red actually. Let's just see what happens there. Okay, so you can see what I've done is I've used selective color. It's obviously changed the whole picture, but I only want that carrot to change. So we're going to fill that layer mask, edit fill with black. Now whenever I make adjustments to pictures, just so you know, I don't really use image adjustment because there's no going back on that. You're much better off going to your layers palette over here and making any adjustments you want here. So what that will do is that will make the adjustment like it has done there and put a layer mask over it, and then you can just paint those adjustments into the part of image that you want them on rather than it affecting the whole image. So there we go. So this is, look at the carrot before and after. So all I've done is I've adjusted the amount of yellows that's in that carrot she's holding in her hand, but it hasn't affected the rest of the image. I'm going to flatten the image and the composite all done. I hope you enjoyed that. Please subscribe to the channel. There will be more tutorials coming. I've been very slow in recording them, but we are in lockdown. So I think I'm going to do a few more. And if there's anything specific that you want to see, let me know. Have a great evening. Don't forget, if you subscribe to the channel, you can also grab a 30% discount, which is under this video. You can use it for any purchases through the website. Just use the code at checkout. Thank you, and thank you for watching Sweet Bambini Design. I would love you to subscribe and see you again next time.